Welcome back. Just finished up with Val Wagner, who is running to be the president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau. I mean, I had her on because I think that people don't pay a lot of attention to those. The Farm Bureau is a very important group in state politics, and they have a hugely important constituency. As does the Farmers Union, obviously, as well. But I think those groups are kind of in an interesting place. When we talk about like how hyper partisan this era is, those groups are in a very interesting position because a lot of times their membership has, like when you're talking about farmers and ranchers, we can guess who most of them voted for.
Right.
So that's it puts them in an interesting position. I think maybe a better example what I'm talking about is like what the NRA did to itself when it's sort of like the NRA existed to advocate for gun rights. But what the NRA allowed itself to do is it kind of morphed into an arm of the Republican Party and isolated itself from people who weren't Republicans, but might have been supportive to them on issues important to them. Like the partisanship became more important than the policy. And I think that can happen to a lot of these groups. I think a criticism, maybe you and I haven't really talked about it, but maybe a criticism you and I share of the Farm Bureau under the previous president, Darrell Lees, is that they were kind of falling into that trap for a while.
Yeah, and not just of being Republican, I think of being a certain type of Republican, right?
In North Dakota, that's really the divide. What flavor of Republican are you these days?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting thinking about those two major farm groups, though. Both of them are in the process of electing new leaders, replacing longtime leaders. Mark Watney at Farmers Union, where Matt Perdue, and there's another candidate running for Farmers Union. And then obviously Darrell Lees leaving Farm Bureau. I think both of those ag groups are interesting. I feel like Farm Bureau has pushed further to the right and ideologically, and Farmers Union has been trying to be less partisan, less ideological. And part of that is the reality of what's happening in the state, right? I think it's led to Farmers Union being more effective at the Capitol than Farm Bureau, which is crazy with a legislature that is this Republican, that the, quote, progressive farm group, which I don't think is the case, is much more effective than the conservative one. And I think Farm Bureau over the last several years has become less relevant in mainstream politics than they ever have been before.
I don't like the genre of social media content that's like the man on the street interviews, because I think they're always edited to make a certain group look stupid or whatever. But one thing that interests me and that I think is true is that when you sit down and you talk about a platform of policy ideas, but you don't tie it to a party or an ideology or a candidate or elected leader, you just talk about the ideas, you find that people's views are a lot more nuanced.
Right.
And I think that's so interesting because people have a reaction where if you tell them that it's a democratic idea, they might just dismiss it without thinking of it. But if you just present it to them as an idea, then you have a lot better chance of getting through. And I think getting back to what I've been talking about is these groups, the Farm Bureau's job is to advocate for farmers and ranchers. That's their job. So I don't know. I think it's really problematic, the path that they're on. And listen, given how important agriculture is to our state, I want them to do well. I want Farmers Union to be successful. I want the Farm Bureau to be successful, and that means strong leadership. So, these elections, Farm Bureau and we've had them both on, or at least one candidate from each race on. I think they're really important.
Well, Rob, I think thinking about that sort of the partisan piece of this, I mean, we could have spent that whole interview with Val just saying, federal Republicans have done this, which is terrible for North Dakota agriculture. How do you feel about that? Tariffs, the beef issue that the president is pushing, health insurance and some of the subsidy piece. I mean, those things are direct negative impacts on farmers and ranchers in North Dakota. But I'm guessing 90% of Farm Bureau members still support the president, right? And I think that's to your point that even when we had Judy Estenson on talking about how 30% of family farmers might be going under because of tariffs and other things. And it was like, yeah, but we still support the president. What is that? What's that logjam? How do you break that logjam of sort of, this thing is affecting my bottom line, this is affecting my family in a
Right.
negative way, to jump out of that partisan sort of feeling?
Well, I think that's the struggle. And that's what I was trying to get at
Right.
when I asked her that question, is how do you sort of navigate these expectations of partisan loyalty when the policy is just bad policy?
Right.
And I honestly, I think not so long ago, when you look at where Val is from, she's from the Forbes, Ellendale area. That's one of those rural eastern counties that not very long ago, and I would have to look at that county specifically, but a lot of those rural eastern counties were a power base for North Dakota Democrats. When you look at when
Yeah.
Heidi Heitkamp won in 2012,
Yep.
a lot of those counties were blue. When she lost in 2018, they had flipped to red. So I think that was a product of a lot of North Dakota farmers doing that calculation, saying Democratic majorities in Washington, D.C. aren't so good for our bottom line. Is there a point at which a lot of those farmers have to do the same reflection and say these trade wars, the tariffs, everything else that's President Trump's bizarre fascination with propping up the regime in Argentina? At what point are those things just bad for my bottom line? I got to change the way I'm voting.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about the area where Val is from. I'm guessing the vast majority of our lives, that area was represented by Democrat. I mean, you're absolutely right. That was Jerry Kelch. That was, I think, Joel Heitkamp went over there far enough. I mean, it was a blue area, which is not even close to winnable anymore for Democrats because of this sort of rural white voters.
I mean, the last time was 2012. I would have to look, but I'd be willing to guess that county, Ellendale Forbes, probably voted blue in 2012.
Yeah, I mean, it's Pam Gollison's territory. It's Bill Ammerman. I can go through all the legislators from down there that have been really, really effective legislators for their district. But at some point, those constituents decided the Democrat brand and whatever's happening in Washington is too much. And it's not going to happen fast where people are going to turn against the president. But if farms start failing, people start losing their third, fourth generation farm because of some of these things.
You can't enjoy at that point. You can't afford to indulge the team sports aspect of it anymore.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
You can't afford to, because you're going broke. You're going out of business, or your kid's going without health care, or whatever.
They can't afford her meds.
Right. Whatever the challenge is, there's a point at which this is hurting me and I can't afford to be hurt. And I'm going to have to change the way I'm voting, which I am hoping. I hate it. I hate saying it because it's so, maybe cynical is not the right, but it's so dark. But it feels like that's what it's going to take to sort of break Americans, right and left, frankly, out of this just absolute partisan loyalty, and have to remember that democracy functions when people are willing to change their minds.
Yeah. And again, I think that when we talk about the government shutdown, it's the same sort of situation. We need people to feel real pain before I think either party is going to move to open the government. And so far, people are not feeling the pain. They will in a few short weeks.
Well, this is a perfect segue for what we wanted to talk about: North Dakota versus South Dakota. I had a column about this.
North Dakota's better. Is that no? That's not what we're debating. Okay.
South Dakota is a great place in many ways with great people, but their politics and the thing is superficially, their politics look nearly identical, right? Republicans just dominate every statewide office, dominant majorities in the legislature. If anything, South Dakota even more so than in North Dakota. But one thing that has happened in South Dakota that hasn't happened in North Dakota is that there has been a takeover of sort of very populist Republicans who have been very successful in winning seats in the legislature, who control their state party. Up here in North Dakota, that hasn't happened. Now, the populists do control the state party in North Dakota, but it's not clear that that's really given them any muscle. I feel like this upcoming election cycle is going to be a key one to determine sort of what path North Dakota is going to take in the future. But an interesting anecdote to me was there's a jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel company. They'll make jet fuel out of ethanol, basically. I don't know a whole lot about their business, but It's a multi-billion-dollar investment. They were going to make it in South Dakota. Now they're making it in North Dakota. And along the way, the CEO of the company said they had to leave South Dakota. The politics were intransigent. I think his direct quote was, North Dakota's a breath of fresh air. And I think the difference is because North Dakota is still governed by pretty pragmatic Republicans who are not ideologues, who at the end of the day are just pro-business, pro-getting things done. And that is the difference between South Dakota and North Dakota. So that is a way, I feel like it's an illustration of what we're talking about, where you indulge these intransigent, ideological, hyper-partisan politics, and it ends up hurting you. Well, that just hurt South Dakota to the tune of a, 2 point whatever billion-dollar project that's now going to be happening in North Dakota.
In the summer of 2024, while you and I were talking about how the normie Republicans had maintained control in North Dakota in that primary, our colleagues in South Dakota were having conversations about, oh no, the far right just took over all these seats, primarily around Summit, right? I mean, primarily around the pipeline, and that was the real driver. And what you had is traditional Republicans who were willing to work with people to advocate for their communities that were gone. I mean, in like leaders, like the Speaker of the House, leaders in both caucuses were gone. And I think one of the points of your column is that could happen here.
Yeah.
It could very easily happen here. And I got to be honest, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about June of 2026. I think there's 14 or 15 districts where there's traditional normal Republicans, at least one, between 1 and 3 in those districts, that may be challenged from the right. And so it's not that hard to imagine 10 of those districts go the wrong way. And the Republican Party in North Dakota, I mean, the state party's already gone, but the North Dakota legislature is all of a sudden controlled by that sort of populist far right wing.
I could tell you they're talking about that. I was assured by one lawmaker in a normie district, who, by the way, was challenged from the far right, in the last election cycle and survived it. They're assuring me that, they're recruiting candidates, the strongest candidate recruitment they've seen in a long time. I know the governor I'm assuming the talk is that the governor is, maybe going to get involved in supporting some candidates down the ballot, although that's a little touchy when you don't want the executive branch picking legislative candidates. It's one thing for a governor to support the candidates, another one for the governor to pick them. But I just, that is it consequential election that's going to come up, and particularly the June primary election. I mean, this is an inflection point for our state. Last June could have been an inflection point for our state. The normies held on. Brandon Pritchard ran a slate of 18 candidates. Almost all of them failed. And in fact, I think the 4 that won were already incumbents. So,
right. But normies didn't expand either. I mean,
they didn't expand either. They held the ground. Can they hold the line again? And what's the critical mass? How many seats can they lose before, that populist wing can really throw its weight around in Bismarck? There's a little bit of a buffer with the Democrats, but each as the closer that divide gets to half and half in the Republican caucus, you're empowering the Democratic caucus to get more of what they want. And then the moderate Republicans have to be careful about, conceding ground to the Democratic caucus too much, because that just ends up costing more of them their seats, maybe, if this continues. And that's really the question is, what do North Dakota voters want? Do you want to be South Dakota? A place where, to believe the CEO of this company that wants to build a multi-billion-dollar jet fuel, he says you can't do business in South Dakota these days. Now, I'm sure that's probably some hyperbole. I'm sure there's plenty of people that can do business in South Dakota, but it's like, right. They're missing a pragmatism back there, and again, I would argue a pragmatism that is central to the success of North Dakota Republicans. They didn't get there. I remember all the years Democrats complaining about John Hoeven stealing their ideas and stuff. Yeah, it's pragmatism. When Democrats had a good idea, Republicans were afraid to grab onto it and take credit for it. And, maybe you can be critical of them for that. But at the end of the day,
that used to piss me off, Rob, in my previous professional life.
But from a good government perspective, it's like they were just grabbing what worked. This will work. We think this is a good idea, and we don't care who came up with it. There is some virtue to that. And that's missing in South Dakota. Does North Dakota want to go down that road? There's a lot of people that do, because they're caught up in this partisan ideological fog, and I don't know when it's going to clear.
So part of me is, or not part of me, all of me is really happy to hear that that you've heard from a normie Republican who said their candidate recruitment is going well, because I am nervous about that. I mean, engaging in district conventions and in internal Republican politics is not a fun thing right now. I mean, we used to have a time where you'd have candidates would be getting recruited by the Democrats and Republicans to run for an office just because they were a good community member and they weren't really identified ideologically. I don't know that you have that anymore, just because so few seats are competitive from a partisan point of view. But I worry that a lot of those people are like, I don't want to engage in partisan politics. I will be honest, I'm intrigued by the idea of a rise of independent candidates. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next, couple cycles, but we're seeing in places like Alaska where independent candidates are competing and they're winning, and they have caucuses of normal Republicans, independents, and Democrats that are the governing majority. That's intriguing to me.
I think the thing about independence is, if you see a real rise where they get some traction, it's going to last for a cycle, maybe two, at which point the fever breaks, whatever party, what the parties adjust, and then the independents get reabsorbed, is typically what happens.
I think the only way it works is if they're real independents too. You can't have somebody, I think there's somebody running for the U.S. Senate in South Dakota right now who ran as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate and now is running as an independent. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
I hear that like people say, Carl Munn should just run as an independent. Well, she's run as a Republican twice now. And then ran, with all this backing from down. I mean, someone like that, it's like they're defined now. Right. It's hard to overcome that, to where you're right. They have to feel authentically independent. Not, I'm using the independent label as a shield to kind of obscure something about myself that because it's inconvenient to call myself. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, the U.S. Senate candidate in Nebraska in 2024, Osborne, he was a machinist or something like that, who truly was nonpartisan, and to the point where the DSCC was told, we don't want anything to do with the Democratic Party, stay away from us. And he came within 2 or 3 points. He's going to run again. And guess what? It's often just you get that one shot. And if you don't win in that one shot, you get baggage and some of that stuff. But I'm intrigued by it.
It's kind of what I was talking about, where if you divorce the policy ideas from a partisan or ideological label, they become a lot more interesting all of a sudden. Now it's hard because so many policy positions are sort of pigeonholed as Republican or Democratic as well. So
as long as I've been involved in politics, there's been frustration. Why do voters in North Dakota always vote for the progressive side on initiated measures? I mean, often it's the progressive side that wins, because there is that disconnect. Or the city of Bismarck used to have a city commission that was 4 progressives and 1 conservative, while being 80%
not that long ago, Minot of all places had multiple progressives on the city council.
Yeah, you remove that D and the R, and people sort of look at the person and look at what they believe in. It's like, I'm open to this person, but when the D and the R is there, it's hard for people to sort of move past that.
And before somebody emails and says, well, we should just get rid of partisan labels, trust me, we will find another way to label people,
right?
Because that's just what we do. I'm not saying it's good. You're just not getting away from it. So,
listen, I'm for nonpartisan legislative races, and let's go unicameral. Let's go full on Nebraska here, great. Even though they still run as progressives or conservatives.
Great. And while you're shouting at clouds, that's just not going to happen.
What do you think that the people who are benefiting from the current system aren't going to change the current system?
I think the voters aren't going to change the current system.
Sure.
I think if you put that on the ballot, I don't think it would pass. I don't think the voters would go for it. And I think you'd probably have a lot of people right and left voting against it. So I don't think it's popular. It's not what the voters want,
Sure.
And what brings me back to my my favorite theme is that it's the voters' fault. They really are getting what they're voting for.
We're back to normalcy again, where you're saying that the voters aren't very smart, and I'm refusing to take the bait on that one.
Yeah, well,
Been a
and
couple times where I've
it
said it.
it's collectively, like individually they're smart, but when they
Yeah,
act in a herd, they make stupid decisions or want contradictory things. It's a difficult thing. But again, I don't like exonerating the voters from all this and pretending like it's all top down, because it's not. A lot of this
sure.
really is coming from the bottom up, and they're getting what they want, and it's hurting us. So that's a difficult thing. Um, let's move on. We actually got a listener text, Ben from Crystal, North Dakota, which I believe is near Hoople, North Dakota. Is that right?
That might be right. I'm just going to say it's right just because, I mean, the fact that you just worked in Hoople is very impressive.
I like I love Hoople.
I recently drove through Annetta, North Dakota, the home
Yeah.
of the world's largest turkey barbecue.
Oh,
Wonderful community. And
yeah.
if you have you been to the Annetta Turkey Barbecue?
I have not. No.
I've been twice. It's a sight to see. It's delicious. It's North Dakota to a T. Go to Annetta to the world's largest turkey barbecue.
I love rural North Dakota so much, and all the little towns and all the little diners. It's special place. Anyway, Ben is from Crystal, North Dakota, and he texts. He's actually talking about an episode that's a ways back, episode 629. He says, "Hi, Rob and Chad. I just listened to episode 629 from a couple of months ago that contained your discussion about what SNAP can and cannot be used on. I agree that it should be slightly restricted. The WIC program already includes a curated list of foods you can have. I don't think it would be too difficult to do kind of the inverse and use a carefully curated list of a few items you can't have. You could borrow language from various soda taxes to decide what defines a pop and do something like 5+ ingredients and a simple sugar content over 50% by volume to rule out basically every candy bar or snack cake or similar junk foods." So what he's talking about is I had written a column saying, it's not unreasonable. North Dakota should seek a waiver. A number of states have under the Trump administration. In fact, we're doing it now. In order to, because it was a criteria of getting a whole bunch of extra money from the federal government. So we're going to be bringing our program, our SNAP program, in line with that, and kind of ruling out some of the junk foods and pops and candies. And, Chad, when you and I talked about it, I know you're a little suspicious of the impulse. I felt like you and I kind of had a lot of agreement though on some of the stuff. I think there's just some things that just obviously should not be part of the SNAP program.
Yeah, my biggest concern with this sort of blanket statement is little Johnny, just because his parents don't make a lot of money, still should get a milkshake. And I know it's the milkshake machine that really set you off on this thing. So I also, you said that North Dakota is going to change its rules on this. I also hate the idea of Robert Kennedy Jr. sort of being the impetus for some of these changes, because
I don't like Robert Kennedy either. But again, divorcing the politician and the party from the policy.
Oh, look at you bringing that.
You like that?
Good work.
And sort of my rebuttal to the idea that little Johnny can't get I would remind you of the name of the program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program. So the idea is this is supplementing money that little Johnny's parents are already getting, and it's supposed to be make sure that they get nutritious food. So the government's money can be spent on nutritious foods, and then if little Johnny wants a milkshake, his mom and dad can pay for that out of their own money.
I believe there's a former great Yankee who said it's deja vu all over again, us having this conversation from several months ago. I think we're both making the same points, but
yeah,
I think the texter's point is that this can be implemented. It won't be that complicated. That maybe it's worth a shot. And
I think maybe the texter's mind is also on, because this was just in the news again with again our legislature considering, how we're going to direct this. What's the it's like 500 million, and then I think there's some additional dollars we can that we can access by aligning our policies with some of this, which is what they're doing. I don't think this is a bad change for SNAP, and I think liberals dying on a hill like this is just bad for them politically. I think most Americans should you be able to use food stamps to buy candy bars? I think most Americans are like, no, of course not. buy candy bars with your own money.
Right.
I don't think that's an unreasonable position. So, yeah, we don't need to litigate that.
So, yeah, we can keep talking about this if you want, but I think we're both in the same place. So what do you know about the special session, by the way? I mean, I'm hearing January timeline. Is
January,
that what?
February. I don't think they have a time, like a specific set of dates set up. A lot of obviously anytime there's a special session, a lot of concern about keeping the train on the tracks.
Keep it narrow, folks. Keep it narrow.
Keep it narrow focus. Don't try to get cute or try to bring back or bring in new issues, because everybody tries to do that. Or not everybody, but a lot of people have a pet project that maybe got killed in the last session, and they think they can get it snuck in because everyone's in Bismarck for real quick and want to go home again. But yeah, my understanding is like end of January, early February is what they're aiming for. And then they really want to keep it focused on those new funds and save everything else for the next legislative session after the next election too.
Get into town, spend all those federal dollars, go home, complain about the Fed spending too much money. Got it.
In North Dakota's a little bit unusual because our legislature only meets officially or for a regular session every 2 years. Yeah. So really, I mean, in some ways, these are a lot of lame duck lawmakers who are going to be meeting in an election year. I'm all for them doing the necessary work, but if we're going to have consequential policy debates, that needs to wait till after this election. North Dakotans are getting ready to elect a new legislature and some new statewides, and let's see what that election before we start getting into some of these debates. So,
and that we need to talk about District 42 at some point as well, because
we have a couple minutes here, because that's so my understanding is they have submitted a number of signatures that, if they're all valid and they pass, and I think the Secretary of State's office has till like November 2nd or 3rd or something like that to verify them. If they're all verified, they're going to force a special election, at which point I think the governor's going to put it on the June primary, which Dustin McNally, who was appointed in District 42, was already going to have to appear on. I don't know what we just accomplished.
So I hope the governor calls the question. I hope he holds a special election, blames it all on Brandon Pritchard for this taxpayer dollar being wasted. This is what Brandon Pritchard and these people who signed this petition wanted. Let's have this election. Let's elect whoever the legislator is from District 42 to fulfill the rest of the term right now. Call the question. Make Brandon justify wasting taxpayer dollars on this.
It's interesting because an analog to that, or something similar, is, remember that special election in Dickinson, where you had everybody on Facebook was hooting and hollering, and they gathered petitions and they recalled a member of the city council to the ballot, and then nobody stepped up to run against him, and they ended up having a special election to where there was no named. Now I think somebody kind of ran a half-hearted write-in campaign, but nobody stepped forward to challenge him. Now in District 42, it's going to be really interesting because 42 is an interesting district. It's kind of a purplish, even blue district when the UND students are there.
Well, I think it used to be. The last redistricting brought in the Air Force Base and some other stuff. So this district is much redder than it used to be.
Even so.
Yeah.
What you're going to have is McNally, who will appear on the ballot automatically because he's the endorsed candidate by the party. And then you're going to have a challenger from the far right. So we're pretty much guaranteed 2 Republicans, but it's an election. So that means Democrats or Libertarians or anybody or independent candidate, anybody else could run as well. So Democrats are going to put a candidate on the ballot. And then that candidate is going to have, united support from Democrats, and the Republicans are going to be splitting the vote. Now, is District 42 red enough to where 2 Republican candidates can split the vote against one another and still beat a Democrat? I don't know, but you're rolling the dice.
Right. Well, and I'm actually not sure the Air Force Base is in District 42. I don't want to be corrected in real time on this podcast. Okay. It has gotten much more conservative because they expanded beyond that. But I think that is such an interesting thing. But also, on the flip side, you have a Democrat, you have McNally, you have ultra-conservative. Do the Democrats and McNally split the normal vote and then you have the right wing. Maybe because isn't it
Yeah.
Doug Ozawowski's wife, the current
Connie.
sitting legislator whose wife is now running or ran for the like?
She ran for the endorsement. Obviously, we're going to see, once the election gets called, we'll see who is in officially. It'll be McNally and at least two other candidates. I got to think. So we'll see who they are. But yeah, I mean, it's the wife of
It's a crapshoot,
right.
And I also think I look back at the 2024 elections in the primary where Emily O'Brien won. Nobody voted in District 42. So I don't think you get that many more people to vote if you wait till the June primary. I would rather do it when the UND students are there.
Well, that's
because there'll be higher vote turnout.
That's a good point. It's going to cost the taxpayers more.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah. And for what? I mean, again, now I should make this clear. Whoever wins the special election, then they're in. They do not have to appear.
Yep.
They do not then have to run at all in 2026.
Through November of 2028.
But here's the thing. It would have been free in that the taxpayers are already paying for an election in June and November next year because we're obligated to by law. Dustin McNally was already going to have to go through that process and appear on the primary and appear in the general to have his appointment confirmed. If he wins the special, then he's in and he's good. But we're spending money that we didn't need to spend. If you don't like Dustin McNally, challenge him in the June primary next year. You didn't have to hold the special election. So maybe the governor will do that. I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. And the question of the students in District 42, the students and McNally's a professor at UND too. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
And I know we think of like college campuses as being a little bluer. I mean, I think
our college campuses are pretty red.
Right. I mean, there's 3,000 people who are at the Turning Points event up at UND recently, and a lot of those I would assume are college students. So I think it's going to be interesting how the governor handles this if the signatures actually go through. But I don't think
I do think the signatures will probably go through. I don't anticipate, barring something really having gone wrong, I don't anticipate any problems there. I think we're probably going to have this special election. Then the next question becomes, when does the governor call it?
Yep. You're going to have the biggest turnout if you do it when the students are still there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to stop it there. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it as always. If you want to leave us a voicemail or send us a text like Ben from Crystal did. By the way, Ben, thanks for weighing in.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for listening. If you want to do the same, 701-587-3141. You can call that number and leave a voicemail, or you can just shoot it a text. I promise a real person won't answer, so you won't have to interact with another human being. You can just talk to our robot, and then we'll respond on the show. If you want to follow us on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, X, we're at Plain Talk ND. That's our handle. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host, Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
And as somebody who really likes to eat beef, I'd like to say thank you for that.